Hi guys, I'm Kevin. Welcome to my channel. Today we're making Bannock. How do you like that COVID beard? Alright, this is a video response to Wade, or Woodswalker 1965. Wade is a YouTube buddy of mine, and Wade has put out a challenge to make Bannock in a YouTube video. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you my Bannock recipe. And my neighbor started a chainsaw, so let's skip this intro and get right to it. So my Bannock recipe is something that's really evolved through time, but it remains quite simple. It begins with 4 cups of flour. Now you can use all-purpose flour for all 4 of those cups, or you can swap out whole wheat flour for 2 of those cups if you like. So that's 4 cups of flour followed by 3 tablespoons of baking powder. And here in Canada we're lucky because we don't just have baking powder, we have magic baking powder. This stuff really is magic. It's what causes the bread to rise. Just mixing a little bit of water with this will create that effect. The third ingredient in this recipe is a 1/4 cup of lard. Now lard isn't very popular to cook with anymore, but it is very traditional to this recipe. Lard is a fat, but it's really quite stable. You notice that in grocery stores it's not kept in the refrigeration aisle, it's kept on the shelf with the baking supplies. It's very, very stable, and even mixed in the dough, it will last an awful long time on a canoe trip. And the 4th ingredient is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now you don't need to use a food processor, but I do like to use it. It just makes the job of mixing all these ingredients really, really quick and simple. Here it is. Here's my Bannock. It's packaged up, ready to go on a trip. This is about 2.5 or 3 cups worth of Bannock. I don't measure it very carefully. I just do it by eye. This is a whole wheat version. This has 2 cups of whole wheat flour and 2 cups of all-purpose flour. All it's left to do is mix this with some water and make a dough. To do that, I'm going to use a plastic wash basin. This is something I bring on canoe trips. I would never bring this on a backpacking trip, but this fits inside one of those blue barrels, and it's very handy to mix Bannock in and to do your dishes. So that's it. I'm going to reserve a little bit in the bag just in case I add too much water to this and I need to dry it out with more flour. So next I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm just going to add it gradually and mix it with my hand until I get a nice wet sticky dough. There, it's coming together quite nice. So now I've got a wet dough, a nice wet sticky dough. It's sticking to my fingers. That's a good sign. That is just what you want for most recipes. A lot of folks will fry their Bannock in a frying pan. They'll do a kind of a dry fry with just a little bit of oil, or they'll do a fry with much more oil, kind of like a donut. That's very, very common. When I make Bannock, I'm going for a bread substitute. So I want this to be a lot more like bread rather than a crumbly scone or a cake or something like that. So what I'm going to do, it's kind of unusual. I'm going to knead this bread, and I'm going to give it a good knead for about 10 minutes. And that's another reason why I use this bowl. So just for 10 minutes, I'm going to knead this dough, and that's going to develop the gluten in the dough, and that's going to help it behave more like a bread rather than a scone or some sort of a cake like that. It's kind of boring, so I'll speed this up. If you don't have a plastic wash basin like this in camp, you can mix your dough in the plastic bag, and you can do the kneading on a paddle, or I suppose on the surface of your canoe or something like that. There's no magic to this. I just fold it and push it around like that. Fold it, push it. That's all you're doing. You're just playing with the dough, trying to develop the gluten. All right, this dough is looking really, really good. It's starting to get very elastic. I've kneaded it for about 10 minutes now. It's looking fantastic. You'll notice the bowl is nice and clean because through kneading it's picked up all the little bits of dough and incorporated it. Sometimes the dough will get a little bit dry as you're doing this. If it does, just put in a very little bit amount of water, just a tiny bit, just a teaspoon or half a teaspoon. That's even a bit too much. There, just a little bit of water like that, and then knead your dough in that water, and it's just gonna pick up a stickiness again. And that to me is what you want. You want enough water in there to activate with the baking powder. I find the dough should just be a little bit sticky, and you'll get really, really good results. Okay, so there's my nice sticky, well kneaded dough with whole grain flour mixture in it. Okay, all right, so my dough is all ready to go. It's looking really good. It just needs to be baked. So what am I going to bake this in? Well, at home you would bake it in a baking pan or a baking sheet, but I don't have that, and I don't want to do a big batch in the backcountry. I don't have a place to store it or keep it the way I do in my kitchen at home. So if I'm in the backcountry, I'm gonna go for a smaller baking pan like this. I've got a couple different sizes. These are sort of specialty item baking pans. You can find them online. You're not going to find them in your local hardware store, and they're just a little bit smaller. This one I think is 4 inches, and I believe this one is 6 inches in size. And they're ideal for baking for small groups in the backcountry where you don't want to have a lot of leftovers. So my typical pattern on a 10 or 12 day canoe trip is to make a batch of bannock like this once every other day maybe, and I'll save half of it for the next day, then I'll make another batch. All right, we're gonna oil our pan, and just put a bit of oil in the bottom of that pan, and I'm gonna spread my dough around. I'm gonna do the top first, get it a little bit oily, add a little bit more oil. That's plenty. So I'm just going to oil up my dough, flip it over so the top is nice and oiled, and then I'm going to just push it around, and that pan should be plenty big enough. All right, what am I going to bake this in? I've got this great dough ready to go. Normally on a canoe trip, I'm going to use something like this, my reflector oven. I'll put this beside a fire, and I will put that in there, and that's going to work just perfectly. The heat from the fire is going to reflect and bake. I find you want a fire with a lot of flames, like a kindling fire, and keep that kindling fire going. That generates a lot of heat and creates a nice bake. Unfortunately, in COVID times here in Ontario, they've declared a fire ban because we don't want fire crews out fighting fires. They don't have to. Under the fire ban. It snowed 2 days ago, but that's the rules, and that's to keep people safe. So another option I have is to use a billy can, and I've done a video on this where I take a billy can, I put it over my stove, I create a bit of a spacer, and I use a smaller container like this, and the billy can on top of a cooking stove will create basically an oven, and it works really, really well. But I've done a video on that already, so I'm not going to do that today. Today I'm going to go old school. And today we're going to do something very special. I'm going to pull out the heavy gear, and I'm going to bake this old school car camping style. It's a style of baking and cooking while you're camping that I learned when I was in Scouts many years ago, and it's what really got me into this whole interesting cooking in the backcountry concept. Let me show you. Isn't she a beaut? But wait, that's not all. There, how's that for an oven? So the trick here is to manage the temperature, keep your eye on the gauge, and adjust the pressure. Keep that pressure up and adjust the dial to give you more or less heat. And you're also going to want to rotate that pan around every once in a while because the heat inevitably is going to be uneven from one side to the other in one of these things. They work really great though. We had one of these when I was in Scouts many years ago and baked a lot of stuff in it, and when I saw one in Walmart one day I thought gotta have it. So Wade, or Woodswalker 1965, started this little challenge. It's not so much about the Bannock as it is about the times we're in, the COVID times, so to speak. So he initiated this little challenge to not just make Bannock, but to bring some attention to some of the charities and food banks around us. I'm pretty fortunate. I'm working from home. Yes, my world has been disrupted, so to speak, because of COVID and quarantine, but I'm pretty lucky. Some people have lost their jobs. They're worried about paying rent. Business owners are struggling. They've also got to pay big rents. And it's something that is really weighing on some people. So this video and all the ones to follow are hopefully just a reminder to be mindful of our neighbors and what some of them may or may not be going through, and to remember those food banks that you have available to you and other charities that are supporting local folks. Here in my locality, we've got a really good food distribution network that links up all the food banks and makes sure food is equally distributed and fresh stuff doesn't spoil, and food gets to the people who need it the most. And right now there's an awful lot more people that need that kind of attention. So if you are able to, certainly contribute to your local food bank or a charity that's going to help out folks in need at this time. All right, before we get to see the bread, I want to tag a few other YouTubers. I've got two in mind. Richard Outdoors over in the UK. Richard's got a kind of a young channel. He's putting out some interesting stuff. He's doing some dehydrated food and some hiking stuff, so I'm sure you'll like what Richard has to offer. Richard, I'm looking forward to seeing your Bannock. And I'm also going to tag John and his partner Aaron over at Backcountry Angling Ontario. John has a very exciting channel all about backcountry tripping in Ontario and canoe tripping in particular, and catching fish. And I've seen his partner Aaron make Bannock in a hot tent while they were winter camping. So I'm looking forward to your video, guys. And I know, Aaron, you've got some charities in mind, so looking forward to that. That's really ready. That's really good. So there's my Bannock. It's looking really good. It's nice and brown on the bottom. It had a bit of a split in it. I usually don't get that. That's kind of unusual. But it's definitely cooked. It looks really good. Let's cut into this and see what it looks like. So guys, that's my Bannock. It holds together pretty well, almost like a piece of bread. Not exactly like bread. It's still a little bit crumbly. This is the whole grain version, which doesn't hold together quite as well, but boy, it tastes good. I'm going to enjoy this with a little bit of butter on the hot bread, and that is something special. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.